I'm Michael Knowles, here to tell you that Rules for Retrogrades, the book and the show, are out now, and you absolutely need to check it out before the thought police confiscate all of it and lock you away.
Rules for Retrogrades out today. Counter disruption. We're disrupting the plans of the radicals. Everyone pick up a copy if you don't already have one. And if you do have one, please leave a review in all the relevant places so that we get it into the hands of all the people that need it. Rules for Retrogrades. Rise.
If you like what you're hearing on the Rules for Retrogrades podcast, please consider supporting Dave and myself on Patreon. Parish orphans, retrogrades, fellow Americans, what is going on in the United States of America? When you look to the TV or in some inner cities, if you look out your door, what you see is pandemonium, chaos, civil unrest, arson, and then when you go back to the TV you had on, you see fake news, lying, and a vile kind of implicit support for the civil unrest that's happening outside. And I'm not just talking about CNN. So today, 9 things you're hearing too much or too little about the riot, about the race war being stoked, created, fomented by the media and the interests which really back the media. The tail is wagging the dog. This doesn't mean that organic people, useful idiots, don't buy into it. Turn on the TV, look out your door. They do. 9 things you're hearing too much or too little in this new state of civil unrest. Remember, we had COVID-19, which was being implemented by the news agencies for 3 months or more, keeping people indoors and keeping people in fear. Now we're being forced back indoors, in those of us who live near these cities. I'm not too far from Los Angeles. And we're being forced back indoors in the name of fear. So let's get started. The first thing that you're not hearing now, but that you've heard every time a gun debate comes up, a Second Amendment debate in this country, is something we heard a lot 2 years ago here in California, the assault rifle debate. It went something like, high volume ARs serve no conceivable moral end. There's not what conceivably could a good person, a good citizen, a good denizen of the polis, the United States of America, want with an AR. And you know, I always had a good answer. I always said things like civil unrest. How will military emplacements, urban military emplacements, help, right? If they're being told to stand down too. It's not going to be, from the perspective of political capital, it's not going to be any easier for urbanized military emplacements, whether it's guardsmen or Marines or whatever. It will be zero easier for them, given the political capital involved, to use lethal force than police departments. If we're buckling to the left interest, the media left interest, which says, you know, police can never use force, then it's going to be the same story with urbanized military emplacements. This one had me screaming at the TV last night. Why does fake news slip in peaceful protest, this propaganda, peaceful protest, 10 times an hour into their reportage, or more? Peaceful protest. There's no peaceful protesting happening. That's an utter lie. Asserting that these arson/riot things began as peaceful protests is like saying, I don't know, a trespass burglary began as a jog, right? Or a date rape began peacefully. Why do you keep insisting this? It's completely absurd. Understand you're being lied to. The cities that have been the locus in quo of these riots are all the cities that have peaceful protests happening And it's basically the equivalent of a pregame prayer, right? As someone said on Twitter. It's like a pregame prayer. They get together. Yes, it's technically peaceful for a while. Someone has to go for a jog or a walk up to a house they're going to burglarize. And technically they're peaceable as they do so. They're quiescent at first, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that the formal or the final cause of these gatherings have anything to do with peace. And we're going to talk about what would they even be protesting, even if we granted arguendo that they were peaceful protests, which they're not. Number 4, let's get down to it. What's really going on here, and it's rather evident when you see a few small angles, you can see the big angle. The race war, the media figures and media interests, we're really talking about George Soros and the front groups, is designed here to replace COVID. It's going to serve the same function in the far left Soros operative mind. Wait, but before we go there, this is part of number 4, the replacement of race war for COVID-19 stuff. We talked about a trespass burglary beginning as a jog. Now I want to go and say, speaking of Ahmaud Arbery, this is a really important point to understanding the real game here. What happened to that story? It was about 3 weeks ago, right? At the beginning of the second week of May, we heard about this Ahmaud Arbery, the jogger. And it turns out now he was, as the so-called vigilantes suspected in the case, he was up to no good, it appears. But the story has vanished fast and furious, like so many pairs of Jordans from an inner city Nike store, right? This, boom, poof, gone. They vanished it. This is also evidence of a vast Soros front group collusion between media groups to replace COVID-19 as the story du jour and the force du jour to keep people in their homes and keep them scared and to keep them hating one another. So what really happened to Arbery is that when crime catches up with a young criminal, if he's black, the media weighs in two hands. They weigh how much can they diminish this young criminal's criminal past versus how much can they exaggerate the so-called racism of, usually it's an unlikable low IQ cop, right? And an unlikable, stupid looking low IQ cop, which is what it is, which is what you have on the TV. Kind of a mouth breathing looking idiot in most cases, who's easy to stir up hatred there against. And they just vanish. We're going to talk about this in the case of the not really connected original story last week to these riots. It's not connected, but they're alleging it. We'll talk about that man in a little bit, but with regard to Ahmaud Arbery, this guy was less likable than the two vigilantes who ended up administering a kind of what appears to be citizen's justice with extreme force against that young jogger. And the evidence of the vast collusion, the intermedia Soros driven nature of that story was how fast they vanish it. It's gone. It is gone. It is nothing, right? It's vanished in the blink of an eye. They're like, this guy's too much of a liability. This guy, Arbery, yeah, he's not the one. We'll wait in a nation that has lots of violent crime like ours. We'll wait for the next instance of this, and we'll jump at it, and we'll stir up the race war there. It's easy to do. It's just playing the numbers. I'm surprised they don't do it more often, if truth be told. Much more often. I'm not just saying this for effect. I'm surprised the media doesn't stir up a race war more like 6 times a year, every 2 months, instead of it's like once every, twice a year, something like that. So it's a weighing thing. It's a balancing test. How much can we exaggerate the racism of a cop? He's probably a stupid, low IQ cop. This is a problem. As a youth, I always had, in a safe city in Texas growing up, being stopped for no reason. It's a bias that cops have against young people, which is not fair. And a bias cops have, maybe it's not super critical, but it is probably more fair against ex-cons. We have to talk about that in the facts at hand, which we will in a couple segments here. They mix that, they balance it against how much can they downplay the criminal past of all these guys, and they're always criminals or ex-criminals. It's remarkable. They can't get one. If there's a systematic racism problem in police departments, and it's not just a stupidity, low IQ problem, prudential issue, well, then why do they never have like a upstanding citizen, right? Why do they always have to pick some guy with a criminal record? 6 felonies in his record, which is what we're dealing with last week and this week. So George Floyd had 6 felonies on his record, and the media's just lying to you about this man. So we'll get to that in a second. I have more notes here than I normally have. Number 5, every one of these looters, recall, is a criminal and an enemy of the state. Demasked. It's just, you're finding out, okay, this is who this person is. It's opportunism, which you'll hear like 2 or 3 times an hour. That's not actually inaccurate. It is opportunism, what you see happening. But it's the kind of opportunism that a seasoned criminal or a criminal with culpable mens rea that was already waiting for such an opportunity exhibits. It's not the kind of opportunism where, I just set this building on fire because the cops aren't going to be able to handle the payload of crime, which is suddenly broken out. They're not just taking things from the Chanel store in Soho because I made a bad decision in real time. These are people that are calling their friends. Again, there's a collusion of efforts. They're calling their friends from out of state lots of times. Fox News was reporting. And they're ready. They're ready to go. And also, they know that this is a pre-organized event. It starts out as a less unlawful kind of peaceful protest in the late daytime hours. But the goal, the telos of these gatherings is always, violence, mayhem, arson, and larceny. Okay, law-abiding people do not respond to urban chaos with lawlessness, arson, larceny. So to call it opportunism, which technically is right, is we have to restructure, reconfigure, recontextualize what kind of opportunism we're talking about. We're talking about opportunism by career criminals, people with a culpable mens rea that are looking to do theft or worse any chance they get, and do it. So any of these people you see taking from the shop fronts, they have no place in society. They have no place in our society among us. I'm trying to here on Rules for Retrogrades, I'm trying to recontextualize. I'm trying to give you a kick in the seat of the pants, people. None of these are good guys that made like a bad decision because it was a wacky day. The sky's a slightly different color. It's kind of orange because there are fires that they set. Woke up and you couldn't match your socks, your tube socks that morning. That's all nonsense, right? A lawful person of a basically good disposition, or basically what Aristotle and St. Thomas would call a disposition oriented at general justice or the common good. Yes, they've made mistakes. We're not using the perfectionist fallacy. Everyone has. A basically lawful person does not run into a shop, break the window, take stuff from it, or take stuff from a shop with a pre-broken window. You're being lied to. I can't even watch it without yelling and throwing crap at my screen. All right? This is opportunism plus it shows who already has a criminal mind and what we call at law a culpable mens rea. They're just waiting for the opportunity. So it's that kind of opportunism. It's not, oops, I made a bad mistake. I made a bad decision and I called my friends from a nearby state, and I said, we're going to load up on Chanel gear or, Apple gear. That was a one-time mistake. I made it once. That's grand larceny at the volume and the level that these people are taking things that's not there. Also, you barely hear the A word, arson. Arson's a serious offense in the common law. In the common law, it's like next to murder. It belongs next to murder. And not to mention the violence, the savage beatings. Holy cow. The savage beatings that I've seen on Twitter, YouTube, some on the news, though again they're not covering much of it. These are vile people that need to be dispatched to take the country back. All of us, law abiding. I don't care what your race is. Race figures its way into this, but it doesn't figure its way into what the solution is. The law abiding of all the colors of the rainbow and all that nonsense. It's fine if you're law abiding. Most cops or vigilantes, a la George Zimmerman from the Trayvon Martin debacle, who find themselves in the hot seat. Like, I'm trying not to use the names of the current people because it's not related to the riots that are happening at all. They show evidence of extremely low IQ, not racism, bad prudence, no kind of walking wisdom, and low IQ. These are IQ, 90s, 95s, a lot of them. They do stupid things. You went to high school with a lot of these people. A lot of them have power issues. They become cops. It's not racism, though. It's stupidity. It's a general kind of unlikability. That's what's really going on with a lot of these. The media says racism because of the frequent race of the involved ex-convict who ends up getting killed in these cases. And of course, you have to remember that the media is sitting back, the George Soros mainstream media, waiting for this to happen to a sufficiently, I guess, not that violent or not that threatening ex-con, who these people always are in these stories that go national. And it's always surprising how they can't, as I said before, they can't select a dude that has little to no rap sheet. It's ridiculous. But they're self-selecting them, so they always wait for a cop on a black criminal so that they can stir up the race war. And they were extra interested in doing it. And again, the tell is they tried about 3.5 weeks ago with Ahmaud Arbery, and they jettisoned it. Like yesterday's garbage, they S-canned the story. So many vigilantes and cops, remember, have a reductive view of ex-cons. And by reductive, I don't necessarily mean wrong. This is a kind of bias. It's a kind of prejudging or prejudice. It doesn't provide for the distinction that some ex-cons are not recidivists. Some ex-cons turn their lives around, which we keep hearing about George Floyd. We're going to do that next. But many don't. Many don't. And you're going to see this when we look at the extensive rap sheet of George Floyd. And that's all we're going to talk about him, because he has nothing to do with the riots and arson that's happening. Many don't. Okay? The fake news outlets prefer race war, saying all cops hate all blacks. And when they say cops, they mean white people for some reason. I still haven't figured that one out. I never got along with cops perfectly well, if I'm being perfectly honest. And they say all cops, which means white people hate all blacks, rather than most cops, and together with them law-abiding, mistrust and sort of resent ex-convicts. Okay, yeah, maybe that's imperfect. Maybe we don't have the perfect system this side of the eschaton for knowing how to categorize ex-cons. We don't have the categories, because there's a recidivism rate, particularly with violent ex-cons, is through the roof. So we don't know what to do with them. Okay, they're square with the house technically. They served their time, which is usually too short because of sentencing issues in the judiciary. But whatever, they're square with the house. Okay, I'm still going to eye them suspiciously if they're an ex-con. This has nothing essential to do with race. There might be accidental connections. You can go through the statistics and make those accidental connections, but it has nothing essential to do with race. But the point is, instead of saying all cops and all whites hate all blacks, and instead of doing that, saying most cops and most law-abiding, we kind of have an issue with ex-convicts. That's not nearly as grabby, is it? That doesn't stir up the hate, the envy, the malice of the lower classes, which these Soros front groups are doing quite effectively. Now, number 7, I want to come to what you're not being told about George Floyd. You're being lied to. You are being, through commission and omission lies, you're being lied to, prevaricated to about George Floyd. This guy has felonies, violent felonies, in 1998, 2002, 2007, in 1997, I'm not sure if that one was violent, another felony. 2004, another maybe non-violent felony in 2005. And a lot of these years, he has peppered in misdemeanors in a different month of the same year. Aggravated robbery, by my count, going through his rap sheet was actually, it was taking more time. I wanted to do this show early this morning. Aggravated robbery, by my count, 3 times at least. The one that is kind of leaked out to borderline mainstream media was an aggravated assault on a robbery where he forced his way into a woman's home, jabbed a gun in her ribs, and searched her house for money so that he could get drugs. Burglarized home, pointing the gun at the woman's stomach, searched her home for drugs and money. Other arrests are for criminal trespass, shocker, possession of cocaine multiple times, some of the times with intent to sell. Theft, that's generally speaking the common law term. Theft is distinguished from robbery, meaning it's without a weapon. He has at least 9 stints in jail. I'm not sure which of those are state pens, but multiple felonies, 6, right? With several misdemeanors peppered in. And these are just lies, at least lies of omission, right? I mean, his brother was on the TV this morning. He doesn't seem like a bad guy, but probably doesn't have the right worldview on all this. He probably doesn't have the correct worldview. You're actually being lied to, though. People like ex-NBA player Steven Jackson, who say that recently, Floyd moved to Minnesota to turn his life around. Double lie. He moved in 2014 to Minnesota because he'd robbed everybody in the state of Texas, right? I mean, that's where he came from. 6 felonies there. And so, yeah, you pretty much, you pissed off everyone you live with, every one of your neighbors. You leave town. The fact that he's using a counterfeit 20 after all of his monetary crimes, this is not evidence of having turned his life around. This is evidence of the opposite. So, violent crime, monetary crime, drug crime. This guy's rap sheet is a mile long. These are the facts. Sorry. So, even if there were peaceful protests that had broken out all over the country, which there haven't been, they're pre-games for arson, looting fests. And even if there's we'll go on. There's no proximate connection. That's number 9. First, I want to just get to number 8 real quick. Point number 8. Antifa, according to our president and attorney general, will now be designated a domestic terror group. Phenomenal. What in the hell took so long? What took so long? It's obvious. Okay, now do Black Lives Matter. Because they were, yesterday and the day before, all over the news. Not peaceful protesters. These two are Soros front groups. Okay? They're both domestic terror groups. Black Lives Matter is very involved in elections. In cities, like some of the cities you saw on the TV yesterday. Philadelphia and inner city New York. Black Lives Matter has a long history with running community organizing and voting efforts. Remember in Philadelphia, they were intimidating voters from going into booths. They are a domestic terror group. Savage beatings yesterday, including that trucker, who we don't really have the evidence yet to condemn. They said Fox News kept saying that trucker you saw plow through the big group was trying to do it. There's zero evidence of that. He was applying the brakes. And then dozens dozens of men stormed the cabin of his truck, pulled him out and beat him savagely. I mean, how many savage beatings do I have to see? If I guess I could just turn off the TV. All right, so these riots, it sounds like a repeat of an earlier point. These riots have zero proximate connection whatsoever to George Floyd. This is the final point, and it's an important point. They have zero proximate connection to George Floyd. What does it require to report that, to make them report that, this is a peaceful protest and it has everything to do with George Floyd? Because I don't know. Does one person have to be holding a George Floyd sign? These are criminal opportunists, preordained criminal opportunists who wait for these things cooked up by George Soros a couple times a year to go get Chanel gear and to set buildings on fire. They're bad people, right? Anyone can come to Christ and the church and the sacraments, but these are bad people as of right now, waiting to do bad things. And all they do is, they hold one or two signs that say something about George Floyd, and the media, who's aiding and abetting them, all but aiding and abetting them, will say, hey, it started out peacefully, then some people, some fringe element of this gathering got rowdy. That's a lie. But the point is, so I made the point that they're not peaceful before, and now I'm making the point that they're not protests. What is there to protest, right? There's a police officer with a questionable set of facts, with a really violent ex-convict, and the police officer is a dumb-faced, unlikable guy that should have gotten off of his neck. Yes. We don't know what the facts are. We don't notice. Maybe he's just a murderer, and he'll in that case you let due process run its course. If he hadn't been arrested, I guess there would be a different story, that there's something to protest, but people really need to rethink. They're brainwashed by the boomers. What does a protest really do if it's peaceful? I suppose there's some role for it, but it's vastly exaggerated in America after the 60s. I mean, what is there to protest? The guy was arrested faster than any cop on any brutality charge ever. A few days later, and he might just be a murderer, the way everyone in America that I've talked to, like everyone just is jumping to the conclusion. James Madison said, even if every citizen were Socrates, every jury would still be a mob. I mean, this guy deserves a fair trial. If he's a murderer, let the guilty hang. If they're extenuating facts, they will come out. And so will George Floyd's dirty record will come out. Was he saying, hey, if you let me up, I'm gonna kill you? This stuff happens. I mean, this is what cops are dealing with. He's an ex-con. It has nothing to do with race. Ex-convict scumbags, they generally are recidivists. They generally are violent. They generally have a predisposition, a predilection for breaking the law. And the violent ones have the higher recidivist rates and have a predilection for violence. So it's not inconceivable that this trial goes through, and because I don't know all the facts. I didn't want to do all the facts to just say the common sense that we're being lied to by media. But maybe there's some totally extenuating circumstance. I don't know. It looks really bad. Who cares? From my perspective, he's arrested now, which is why I say who cares. And let's see what the trial, if you're interested in it, good for you. You have a right to your opinion, but there's nothing to protest now. Are you protesting that he doesn't deserve a fair trial? Let it go to trial, and if he's guilty, let him hang. For all I care. The hell, I'm known as the most, aside from maybe Ed Fazer and Joe Bassett, the most enthusiastically pro-death penalty Catholic, like talking head out there. So let the guilty hang, man. But you try him first, because due process is also on trial here with this new populism, on the left and on the right. They don't want due process. People were telling me on Twitter, why are you saying alleged? Alleged until you have a verdict, man. But that's the point. It's not just that they're not peaceful protests. They're not protests at all. So if I hear about financial embezzlement by a rich guy downtown in my city here in Southern and Central California, I get to go rape my neighbor And the media, if I'm the right color or the right class, the media will characterize me going and raping my neighbor as a protest. It's absurd. It's absurd. You people, listen to me, man. This is absurd, and there's so much propaganda that I can't even bear to watch. That there's protesting is supposed to have a fixed definition with a fixed meaning. Doing crime that you wanted to do anyway because there's the existence of one or more other crimes somewhere extant in the world is preposterous. And it's preposterous enough, but it's more preposterous that you get the media and therefore most of the lemmings, the brainless sheep out there, I don't know, 9 out of 10 people to say it's a protest. It's just crime. It's organized crime, a different form. It's not a syndicate mob. It is the organization efforts of George Soros in the inner cities to take down America. It's nothing less than that. These are Soros terror groups, BLM and Antifa. They're organized inorganically, top down from the top, by a planned destabilization campaign, the likes of which have been described time and again by KGB defectees, right? Marxist-Leninist defectees to America. A lot of them spoke out in the 60s. You guys are being infiltrated by Marxism, socialism, by the likes of people like Soros and Gates that are destabilizing the country, demoralizing the country, and the third step is really ugly. That's when they take control. That's what they're trying to do. It's not even that early anymore. Today's June 1 in an election year. I've been saying early in an election year all the last couple weeks. We did Kath Mingov week here on rules for retrogrades. It ain't even early. It ain't even early in an election year. We're coming up to it. This is all a destabilization campaign by Soros front group. So there you have it. You know, nine things you're hearing too much or too little as you watch fake news on these larceny crime fests in towns like mine here, you know, north of Los Angeles by a bit. Los Angeles proper, Santa Monica, San Jose, Oakland, here in California, Manhattan. That was really sickening. It makes you sick to look at. And America looks like it's dead. I mean, I've disagreed vehemently all week with the idea that America as founded was wicked, you know, with people on the post-liberal Catholic right. That's what last week, Kath Mingov week, was all about. It wasn't a poison pill. It didn't have to go this way, but it went this way. And it is all but dead. I'll know America's not dead when I start seeing people, shop owners, banding together. If people won't do that, then you're half a man. America, if you won't fight back, then we're a nation of cowards and half men. Thanks. God bless America. God bless you all. And put this riot out. Put it down now.